Hello, friends. Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is a comedian, host, and actor. He's none other than Mr. Jacky Ng. You can find his comedy album No Ice Milo on Spotify or just search YouTube for Jacky Ng. We talked about how he decided to become a professional comic, the comedy scene in Singapore, and a bunch of other stuff. Also, if you like listening to this podcast and want me to keep doing what I do, please recommend me to your friends the next time you guys head out for a meal or drinks. But if you really don't want to, that's fine. By just helping me click that follow button on the Spotify page will go a long way to help. Now that we've gotten all the dirty stuff out of the way, let's go to the fun part, which is actually listening to the podcast. So without further ado, friends, let's jump right in. Alright, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is not an interview, guys. This is just a conversation, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Jacky, to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
It was kind of awkward for me to ask you to come down because we have never met face to face before. So this is like the first time. And then to ask a guy that you have never met before to come down to your house where you have microphones and a camera recording, it's not something that you usually do to somebody you have never met.
Yeah. Especially I think because you're an NUS student lah, right? And there's that reputation there.
Right now, today, there's that reputation lah, huh? But thank you for being more daring than I would have been in coming down lah. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me. I mean, I think if you ask most comedians in Singapore right now, they'd be happy to go onto a podcast. Like most of us don't have that much going on in our lives.
Yeah, in fact, I think most Singaporeans don't have much going on right now. So, actually, before we begin, you actually decided that you wanted to be a stand-up comedian from a pretty young age, I would say. And then, how did that actually come about? Like, what's the thought process behind it?
Well, when I was, I think primary 3, primary 4, I think, my friend showed me the Russell Peters video. I don't know if you've seen it. I think that's how most people started watching stand-up in this part of the world. And I was like, wow, this guy is just talking. Like this is his job. Like he's just talking. I feel like that's a pretty easy job. So that's what I wanted to do. That's what I thought to myself. But I thought that there wouldn't be like stand-up comedians in Singapore. I just didn't think that was a thing that was happening here. So I told myself, oh, maybe I can consider being like an MC and things like that. And so I joined like camps and stuff when I was in poly to sort of get that public speaking skill or to practice that. And then at the end of poly, I went to like a forum. Like the school sent the student leaders to a forum, which was an anti-racism forum. But what happened there was the forum organizers actually just invited 2 comedians. And those 2 comedians were Dr. Jason Leong, who now has a Netflix special. Just came out, I think, 2 weeks ago or last week. And Rishi Budrani, who's a Singaporean comedian. So these 2 guys, they were there. They were just doing their stand-up comedy sets. And the format of the forum was after they were done with their comedy, there'll be a open discussion. People can ask questions about racism. But because they were so good at stand-up that nobody was really talking about racism anymore at the end of the forum, they were just asking them about, oh, how do you start doing stand-up? How do you write your jokes? How do you do this? How do you do that? And that made me realize that, oh, stand-up comedy is a thing in Singapore. You can actually try this out, right? So I found out about all these open mics. I found out about Masala. I found out about Talk Cock. I just didn't have the guts to do it then at the end of poly. And then after poly, I went to MediaCorp for like a 5-month contract job before I went to NS. And that's when I met Fakar Faz. And so at that point in time, I'm like, like it feels like the door is right there. It's really up to me to open that door myself. So I reached out, I asked him, so how do I start doing stand-up? And then he brought me to the open mic, watched it a few times, signed me up for the open mic. And that's how that whole journey began, I suppose.
Yeah, so then what's like the comedy community in Singapore? Is it one that is like tight-knit where everyone knows everyone? Or I would imagine that would be the case, right?
Yeah, because we don't have that many comedians, I guess. I would say probably less than 50. So everyone definitely knows everyone. I wouldn't, maybe tight-knit is not the right word because I don't think everybody is good friends with everyone. I think with any job, with any industry, some people just don't see eye to eye with some people, but I think everybody definitely knows one another. So I feel very lucky to be. I feel like I joined the scene at a time when the scene was still growing and everybody was still nice. It's like, along the years when more people try doing it and then more opinions come in and there's a bit more, I guess, politics that come into play. But like, I feel like I'm very lucky where I joined at a time when everybody was very, very nice, or at least very, very nice to me. And I benefited a lot from that. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, like, comedy in Singapore, I think right now is, from a guy that is not a comic, is slowly shifting, because as I talk to my friends that are of my age or even people like just above me, right, I start to realize that actually, like you said, they are starting to appreciate that comedy is not just a guy going up on stage, like says a few jokes that, maybe we might crack on a Friday night with our friends where we sit around the table, but actually it is an art form. That means if you were to go to a nice set, like a good set where the comics are good, you walk out thinking like, actually the guy's bits, right, although it seemed like it was very natural, it was actually very well thought out. The way he takes pauses in between his sets, or the way he pieces the words together, or even the way he looks at the crowd, right, is quite seamless. And that's if the comic is very good. Then you walk out of the theater going like, oh shit, actually this is really an art form. And this is not just like anybody going up on stage and speaking. This guy has done many repetitions. And then I think now as Singaporeans realize and appreciate this kind of art form, and I think Netflix also has a part to play. Like when you watch a good comic on Netflix now, when you were saying Jason Leong, and I think my friend also was telling me about Jason Leong's Netflix special, so he said it was fucking awesome lah.
Yeah, Jason Leong is fantastic.
Yeah. So I think that's where it starts to shift now, right? Where now increasingly Singaporeans, I hope so, are finding it going to a comedy store like a thing that they might consider on a Friday night, Saturday night, or even on a normal weekday, right? Where previously in Singapore, me or you, when we were kids, nobody ever thought of this, right? Yeah. So I hope that it continues to grow, because I think now as our generation, me and you, we start to bring in the paychecks, right? Now we can go to the clubs and enjoy this kind of content.
Yeah, I think Singaporeans definitely do enjoy and appreciate comedy a bit more. I don't know whether they are as willing to spend their money on comedy compared to a foreign act coming in, right? Like Russell Peters, when he comes down to town, he's definitely a sellout crowd. We had like Daniel Sloss, we had Trevor Noah, we have all these like big international comics coming down. And I think Singaporeans are willing to, or at least the people living in Singapore are willing to pay good money to see these people. Whereas I think there is still this sort of, I don't know, like an Asian inferiority complex thing where like, we just don't think Singaporean artists are that good, right? I think it's not just for comedy. I think it's for music. Like when F1 is in town and Muse is on stage, people spend $200-$300, but like when a Singaporean musician has a, I don't know, EP launch, people don't want to pay $20. They just like, I don't know him. Like, yeah. So I think that has to be a thing that to cultivate, at least that's the next step. I think that there is definitely more appreciation for local artists, but it is important for that appreciation to translate into, for the lack of a better word, money.
Yeah.
That can help these artists make a living lah.
Yeah, because if you actually look at like, I was thinking, if you look at movies, right, Singaporeans love to watch Hollywood movies. If you look at dramas, Singaporeans love to watch Korean dramas. But in the context of comedy, right, I think Singaporeans need to realize that if you were to watch a Singaporean comic, right, then it really resonates with you, because the things that they go through, right, is something that you experience in your everyday lives as well. Sometimes if you watch American comic, right, and then they tell you a joke, right, the type of jokes they tell you, right, we can't really relate to, because they live very different lifestyles from us. But if we were to look at Singaporean comics, right, like sometimes you see experience like maybe something on the SBS bus or at a wet market. These are only things that Singaporeans can really relate to. And then when we go through these experiences down the road, then we can look at these situations and go, oh shit, I heard a joke about this situation, that's why now I find it funny, right?
Yeah, definitely. So when I first started out doing stand-up, I always thought like, I need to have more international appeal. I should write jokes that are more internationally recognized or relatable, because I at the end of my first year, I started traveling a bit. I would go up to Malaysia, I go up to the Philippines, Cambodia, around Southeast Asia and Asia to perform. So I told myself like, oh, you know, I shouldn't focus on writing jokes about national service or Yishun or taking bus or things like that, because these jokes just don't travel as well. But after I performed for a few years, performed for more Singaporeans, I started to realize that I have a better connection with Singaporeans. Meaning if I do a joke about what happens in Singapore, if I talk about living in Yishun, for example, Singaporean people get that, and the kind of reaction I get from them cannot be replicated anywhere else in the world. So I think there was one big moment that sort of made me realize that was when Faz was doing his own 1 hour show at the Esplanade. It was a sold out crowd and I was opening for him. I had 5 minutes up there, and every time I do a theatre show, my legs are shaking. I just cannot control it. But I went up there, I opened with my joke about being in Yishun, and I just it got a good reaction. And it was a wave of laugh that really hit me.
You didn't bomb lah.
Yeah, of course. I usually don't, but that wave really hit me, and my legs stopped shaking for the rest of the 5 minutes. But yeah, that made me realize that this connection between myself, at least, and the Singaporean audience, I will not get anywhere else in the world. And that laugh, that feeling is what I'm looking for every time I go on stage now.
Yeah, what you say is actually exactly what I feel when I did my first podcast as well, right? When you do your first podcast, legs are shaking. Even though mine wasn't like in front of a big audience at Esplanade, but mine was, I knew that whatever I said, when I put it online, people are going to listen. And then I realized like actually halfway through that there's nothing to be scared about, because the things that you are talking about, actually Singaporeans probably feel the same way. And so there's really nothing to be scared about. Like, you should just say what you think, and hopefully, if you can keep it authentic, like you said, resonate with people in Singapore, talking about places like Yishun or whatever it is about Singapore. I think Singaporeans will slowly appreciate that we need to not just support local, but actually we are all craving for local content. And also, I think it's because unlike other type of entertainment outlets, right? For example, movies or dramas, you need expensive CGI or lavish sets. But for comedy, you don't need all of that. You need a good comic and an audience that appreciates comedy. I think if you put these two together and it mixes well, right, then the community starts to grow. It's conducive for comedy as a whole. That's what I feel. Yeah, right.
Yeah, definitely. I think the audience actually is probably more important than the comic.
Yeah.
I've seen, okay comics do fantastically because an audience is hot. It's just on fire and they're ready to laugh, and it's just positive energy. And so, yeah, good audience is important. And I always appreciate the audience members that come up to me to talk to me after the show, that share their experiences at the club with their friends, bring their friends back next time. That is really helpful because a comic, the comic cannot do anything without an audience. Really,
Yeah.
It's. I think we all realized that at the start of Circuit Breaker when we started talking to the webcam and not getting any reaction. So the audience is really what makes the atmosphere of the club. Sure, the comic, great comics will do well with 3 audience. But when we have a good 30, 40 audience members packed into a club, that really helps the confidence of, up and coming comedians. It really helps people enjoy doing the comedy and make them want to keep performing.
Yeah. How do you usually come up with new material? Do you go through something in your own life, or do you see something along the streets and it's something that happens every day, but then you kind of look at it from a different perspective, or slice and dice it in a way that Singaporeans never thought about thinking about it from that angle, and then they say actually that's quite funny, or how do you usually come up with your material?
I don't think I have a
standard way.
Yeah, a standard way I usually talk about things that happen to me. I usually talk about observations, and what happens is whatever that I want to talk about, I write them down, or I try to write them down. I think should be more disciplined that way. I think when I first started, I used to write everything down, but over time, I'm like, yeah, I'll remember it. And then when I get to the club, I don't. But so you have all these ideas. You go to the open mic. An open mic is like a free show, or it's like a...
Where can we find one of these open mics without the circuit breaker?
We used to have the Merry Lion, which is a full-time comedy club. I really don't know if they will still be around by the time we open up. But I think more comics will be happy to start more open mics. I'm gonna start a Zoom open mic actually. I was talking to some restaurant as well before the circuit breaker to do a weekly open mic there. So open mic would be like, free show. Audience can come. If they enjoy the show, they can donate money. If they don't, there's no obligation, right? So that sort of lowers the risk factor for both the audience and the comic, in the sense that now the comic can go on stage without the fear of not giving people value for their money if they're not paying for anything.
Just there to get the reps in, to get the exposure on stage.
The exposure on stage, and also to try out the new jokes that you have. You need to do it at the open mic enough times, see the reaction from the audience, and sort of cut out the fat. Find new punchlines, because that comes with audience reaction.
Trial and error, see what works, what doesn't.
Yeah lah. So maybe 5, 6, 7 open mics, you sort of tighten a joke, get it ready for actual paid show and things like that.
Yeah, I really hope more and more comedy clubs open in Singapore. I think they will. It's just that we have to get past this coronavirus thing first lah.
Yeah, definitely. But also the thing is, a comedy club is not the most profitable business model compared to a regular restaurant or because a comedy club is still a club. If you're selling comedy show tickets $10-15, that's not gonna cover your rent. You're not gonna cover the fees for the acts that are coming through. It's really still about selling drinks lah. So it's a balancing act there. It's hard. I think there have been people that tried to open up comedy clubs in the past. It's just very, very tough because Singapore is so small and rental is so expensive. So we do comedy shows, in bars that are already established. People are already there to drink. And we tell them, hey, here's a comedy show. If you'd like to join us, come back next week. $10, $15.
Yeah, so then what are you guys doing now without the comedy bars being allowed to open? You said you are doing a Zoom open mic, that you're planning to do a Zoom open mic, and before this, I think I saw that you and a couple of your comic friends were actually having Zoom online shows. I don't know exactly what was it, but just tell us more about it.
Yeah, so we were doing Zoom shows. And what it is really you try to do your stand-up comedy set on Zoom. And it took a while to get used to. It is, and I enjoy it a lot now. But at the start it was just weird because you're talking to yourself. Audiences, maybe they can see you. Maybe they are laughing, maybe they're enjoying themselves, but it's very hard for the performer to know that because there's no immediate reaction. But so the thing about a Zoom open mic or a Zoom comedy show is that it can happen in various forms, right? It can happen with the audience turning on their cameras and mic so that you can see and hear them laugh. It can happen with both of that turned off so that you cannot see or hear them laugh. So my preferred way to do a Zoom show now is I will get the audience to turn off their mics, because the connection for different people is just different. So sometimes their laughter is lag or whatever, and it sort of disrupts the momentum of your set. Or sometimes they are in a busy house, their baby is crying or whatever. So I get them to turn off their mics, but I will really encourage them to turn on their cameras so that I can see them laughing. And seeing them laugh is useful for the timing of your jokes, and it's also useful for just your self-esteem to know that people are actually reacting to the jokes. So that's how I usually do it now. I was doing a few shows. There was, I think, 2 with Circles Live that were very helpful in trying to keep comedy alive in Singapore. I think they did like maybe 4 or 5 shows. I did 2 of those shows. And then I was doing 2 shows with Rishi and Sharu, who are Singaporean comedians.
Yeah, I know a bit about Rishi. I don't really know that much about Shahrukh, but I know Rishi not just does comedy. Now he has become he hosts like some kind of show that goes around. I know he has a new video goes around East Coast and
Right. I think that's a show. It's not really a show. Like, it's a video with Bureau, if I'm not wrong. It's a online magazine. So I also did one with them that is not out yet lah. So I have one that I'm going around
it's on the
Sembawang
way.
with them. Yeah, hopefully. Because we shot these videos quite some time back lah. I think it's just that with the circuit breaker coming in, then their workflow was disrupted, so they couldn't get it out on time. So I think they are starting to release them now. So he did that, and I do a weekly news comedy show with Rishi.
Oh, what's it called?
It's called a Rishi Report. So it started out as like we would just talk about the news, or he would talk about the news with jokes. And these used to be pre-recorded videos, but then when the circuit breaker hit, we couldn't really shoot anymore. So we sort of pivoted into like a streaming show. So we stream once a week on Facebook Live. And I'm a contributing writer to the show. I'm a correspondent on the live show. But now that things are easing up, we are planning to do more recorded apps, and we will continue doing those live stream. We are on a break because we're trying to plan for a season 2 to get better guests in and all for the live show. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. And also did 2 Zoom shows with Shahrukh, so they are headliners lah, right? They are big acts that have traveled around the world. Rishi and Shahrukh are married, by the way.
Oh, they're both married. I see.
So I opened for the show. I helped them produce the show, because I guess that's another thing about the Zoom show is that with a regular open mic or regular comedy show, you really just need a mic and you go on stage and you talk. But like with the Zoom show, there are like settings that you need to toggle with. You need to spotlight the performer and things like that. So I was doing those things for them, and I got to open for them as well. So it's just through these different shows that I get to do with these more experienced comics that help me feel more comfortable doing a Zoom show. So,
yeah, because you're what, 25 or 26 now, is it?
I'm 26 this
26 this year. Okay, so 1 year older than me. But yeah, so I think you still have a decent runway.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I'm lucky in that I started when I was 21 before I even went into NS. So I'm lucky that way. But it's just that I think 25 is it's like a magic number, right? When you cross 25, you start to feel like, oh,
I need to do something in my life.
I need to get better at this.
Yeah, that quarter life crisis where I kind of need everybody else around me kind of seems like they know what the fuck they are doing. Now it's time I get my shit together as well, right? I think everybody feels that, but I was talking to this with my friends that day. I was thinking, anybody at 25 that really knows what they want to do, right, I think is either lying to you or they're just really lucky. And I think it's the first one lah. I think most of them are just lying to you lah.
Yeah, I mean, I do know that I want to do stand up, and I'm very lucky that way lah. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
It's just it really worked out lah. I mean, when I first started doing stand up, it was just like, oh, I would like to try it, I guess. When I said at the start about how I want to talk to make money, but like when the opportunity comes to do stand up, you wouldn't think about making that your job. You'd be like, okay, I would like to try it. I would like to be one of these guys talking on the stage. And so I did it, and I was happy, right? And I'm happy to do it without getting paid. I'm happy to do open mic forever. Mm-hmm. But now that I am making a bit of money out of it, I'm extremely grateful for it. Every single day I tell myself that is such a great thing. It's just that I need to really work harder to make the income more sustainable lah. Otherwise, then I'm happy to go and find a day job. It's just harder to find a day job.
And also that one that can kind of not be so taxing on you, so that you can also concentrate on producing good material, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's also just I think my key request for any company that would like to hire me is to allow me to go to the shows, to the open mic, So when I was applying for jobs, or at least an internship when I was in uni, I would tell them I'm happy to do a lot of things. I'm happy to learn. I'm happy to do whatever. You want me to make coffee? You want me to mop your floor? I'm happy to do all those things. What I really, really want is just let me go at 8 o'clock so that I can go to the comedy show after this, after work. Because that's how I was doing it in the army. I mean, I guess I was younger back then, and I'm, I guess, more lazy now. Because when I was in the army, when I was in a stay out unit, after I book out, I would go to the comedy show. And sometimes when international comics are in town, I would stay out with them till like 2, 3 in the morning, and then I would book back in camp next day 7 o'clock. And I was really, really happy. Like, I'm very tired in camp, but it's like, oh yeah, I guess. But nowadays it's like I cannot wake up. It's hard for me to wake up before 12.
So because we live in Singapore where we don't exactly have the full freedom of speech as a lot of, like in America lah, basically. And also nowadays with all that cancel culture bullshit that I really don't want to get into, how do you guys as comics, right, try to navigate around these landmines? Because a lot of jokes and a lot of comedy often pushes the boundaries of whatever kind of lines, right? Racial lines, financial lines, gender, whatever usually is at that boundary, right? So how do you guys as comics in Singapore navigate, especially in Singapore?
Right. Well, before the circuit breaker, it's a bit simpler, right? I mean, when you're in a comedy club, I would think that anything goes with a certain amount of consideration. Like, you don't just go on stage and you yell out, racist words for no reason. Like, if you have a joke, I think most audiences are willing to listen to you in the club. The mess comes when you go online. When someone takes your video, there is no context, you put it up online, people see, and then they get upset. Or it's really the people that are behind the screen that gets upset easily. Whereas in the club, really, I think anything goes. So what I mean, I don't look at myself as a controversial comedian or anything. And I mostly just talk about things that are happening to me. I try to make myself the butt of the joke at the end of the day. And that's, I guess, an easier style. I would think I'm fairly young as a comic. So I don't think I'm important enough for me to talk about like politics or whatever on stage yet. Or at least not in detail. Sure, I have jokes about them, but it's not something I'm passionately talking about. I'm more interested in telling you about myself.
Yeah, I think it also helps that a lot of the comics that are in the scene, right, they're all from like different backgrounds. So that you have like a Faz that is Malay, you have Rishi that is Indian, you have you that is Chinese. So when it's all from different backgrounds, right, then you all discuss with each other like the jokes. Right? Then it kind of like, okay, you give each other the check off. Okay, this joke should be okay with my people lah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do that sometimes. When I have a tweet or whatever, I will screenshot it before I tweet it out, and I'll be like, "Hey, Faz, is this okay?" And then he'll be like, "Okay." Then I can post. But if it's like, maybe not, then I will save it in my drafts first.
yeah, I think about maybe now is not the best time to do it. Yeah, I think that's why the times that we are living in now is so crazy. Like whatever you say, whatever you do, right, you can resurface. It might be okay now, Who knows, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years from now, they pull out some shit about you and then it's suddenly not okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard thing to control. I mean, you just have to do the best of your ability. I mean, it's really say what you think, say what you can say in good conscience. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people that are against cancel culture. I mean, I'm not fully for it, but where's the line? I mean, like, I feel like if you are worried about that, then maybe you are not being true to yourself. Really,
yeah, 100%.
You gotta be if you can really say the things in good conscience and you believe in them, then you shouldn't really worry about it, lah.
I think if you say something now and then maybe 2 to 3 years as culture evolves, and then at that point in time it doesn't seem right, and what you did 2-3 years ago, what you said doesn't fit that culture, then I think then you just be man enough to come out and just say, 2-3 years ago I said it in good conscience. Looking now, it's the wrong thing to say, but people make mistakes. We move on. We would have not reached that point in time if we didn't make the mistakes right now.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. Yeah, it's about, I think we progress as a society when we bring ideas out and we decide together collectively whether we like it or not, or whether it's correct or not.
Yeah, because if if you go and roll back some of the comedy sets, right, like 20, 30 years ago, some of those jokes then, right, will never fly now. They will never be able to be spoken now, right? The only reason why you find it funny is because you know, like 20, 30 years ago, was the joke that was being told and you can understand, right? But I think that's why, even in the US, where they have the full freedom of speech, right, they don't have the full freedom of speech because they are all constricted by this cancel culture thing as well. Same thing in Singapore, lah, yeah.
Yeah, I would think that Singapore, Singapore isn't, or at least in Singapore comedy, we still discuss race and things like that. And I think there are a lot of Singaporeans that enjoy those jokes because those are the jokes that we grew up with, and it's a back and forth, and time will decide lah. But the thing is, I just don't think people should be held against what they said last time, as long as they acknowledge that times are changing.
Yeah, yep. I think there is something very important. I was actually, before I had you on a couple of days back, I was listening to your sets on Spotify, which is Milo No Ice, is it?
No Ice Milo.
No Ice Milo.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. And so you took the recordings that you did in the comedy show, and then you...
Yeah, there was a full recorded show.
I see.
With about, I think, 30 audience members. Did it at a music parlor. So yeah, a lot of fun. I was planning to do one this year actually. I was writing the material for one. Had a concept, the album art and things like that. But we were planning some shows for the recordings at the Merry Lion, and the circuit breaker hit, so it just haven't happened. So I have those jokes. I really don't know if the jokes will hold up post circuit breaker, but I just gotta keep writing them. Yeah,
but actually circuit breaker gives you a lot of material also lah. A lot of stupid shit happened during circuit breaker.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, I think every comedian have things happening to them during circuit breaker, right? So when the clubs open up, every comedian will want to talk about the circuit breaker, want to talk about the coronavirus, and it's a very saturated thing. Like, you gotta still focus on what makes you and what makes you special, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, if we how do we find the Zoom invitations if the listeners out there want to go and listen to your open mic, for example?
Just follow me on Instagram. Any shows that I'm on, I post.
What's the Instagram handle?
Jacky Ng Comedy. JACKYNG Comedy.
Okay, I think that's it for today's show. Thank you, Jacky, for coming on. We're about more than half an hour through, but yeah, I think that's good.
All right, sick.
All right, thank you, Jacky.
Thanks.
Pleasure for having you on.
Thanks for having me. Yep. Bye.